Holloway. She is the author of the children's book series called Little Miss Linda. Welcome, Linda, to the International Book Show. Please tell the listeners where you're from and a little background about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Linda J.M. Holloway. I'm a professor at Alabama State University, so I currently reside in the great city of Montgomery. But I'm originally from the great state of Mississippi, more specifically Mount Bayou, Mississippi. And I always like to put emphasis on Mount Bayou, Mississippi, because this is an all-black town that was founded by two former enslaved individuals, Isaac Montgomery and Benjamin T. Green. So it has a really rich legacy. In terms of who I am as an individual, I've been in higher education for over 30 years now. My area of concentration is counseling education, focusing on mental health in women, Black women, mental health, as well as looking at career counseling for marginalized individuals. So that's a little bit about who I am. I live by the philosophy, dream your own dreams. And what I mean by that is if you have something that you like to do and dream it and actually bring it into a reality. Do not let anyone discourage you because this is a dream that has been given to you as an individual. And I thoroughly enjoy teaching.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Linda, she is the author of the children's book series called Little Miss Linda. So, Linda, can you please tell the listeners on the International Book Show what the children's book series is about?
But before I begin, I just want to thank you so much for having me on the show and thank the individuals that will be listening to this also and what you're doing to expose authors all around the world. So I just want to say that. A little bit about the series is because I am in counseling education, I have written several different articles. But in writing those articles and actually focusing on adults, I also realized very, very quickly that young children was also experiencing the various topics that I was talking about. So there aren't your typical children books, the magical and anything like that. But I began to change my articles into children because I wanted to reach that population. For example, I Love My Happy Hair deals with anti-bullying against hair, book on mental health. Little Miss Linda Goes to Counseling, as well as Little Miss Linda talks about sickle cell. Little Miss Linda talks about rape, sexual assault. Little Miss Linda talks about colorism in terms of diversity. And Little Miss Linda also deals with bad girls in Montgomery. And these about women who are not often talked about in the Montgomery bus boycott movement. So she wanted to speak to young children about social activism and social justice. And then Little Miss Linda copes with divorce and death. So that gives you a broad perspective about the series in terms of what I do. And each of the books I've made it into like workshops. And so I'm able to go out into the community and speak to young children about the various topics in a developmental way in which they can understand.
Now, the title of the series is called Little Miss Linda, and your name is Linda. So, what I'm going to ask you now is that are there parts about you or your personality in your character Linda or the book series?
Absolutely. It's kind of like that inner voice that is speaking, but obviously these are actually fictional books. So there are elements of truth about the books. For example, Little Miss Linda hails from Mount Bayou, Mississippi. So a lot of the scenes are actually taking place. My parents were farmers, so you'll see that throughout the books. So it's definitely some me sprinkled throughout the books, but it's not totally all of the things that are true. For example, in terms of the divorce book, my parents were married for 40 years. And so you will see those different elements actually coming out through the book. So there is indeed a connection between myself and the books.
What would you say is your favorite book in the series? Or if someone said to you, you can only buy one of these books, what one would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a really tough question because I would say all of them are my favorite. And they're favorite for different reasons. But if I had to just choose one, oh, that's a really, really tough one there. But I would probably go with, because I've been focusing a lot on Black women hair in the marketplace. So I would have to say I love my happy hair. And I would choose that book for various reasons. It has a song, it has a dance, and that's the book that I've been giving away out into the community. And I have just been able to see firsthand young children begin to appreciate and celebrate the way their hair grows out of their head, as well as other individuals, and have an appreciation. So I would definitely go with that. Oftentimes people think, oh, that's because this is your first book. But no, I have a really respect for people in the way they wear their hair, and particularly African Americans, because they have been their hair has been something that has been discriminated against. It is something that has a personality to it. It speaks various different language. And so to have the freedom to be able to wear your hair in the way that it actually grows in a natural way and to be appreciated. We also, in the United States, have crown law. And so we're the only people that had to really justify and say that we can wear our hair this way, because you're not hiring us before our hair on our head. You're hiring us because we have the skills and ability to do the talent. So several people have lost their jobs. Several children have been expelled from school. They've been bullied about their hair. So I would definitely go with I love my happy hair for those various reasons.
Right. We are now going to concentrate specifically on your book out of the series, which is called Little Miss Linda Speaks About Death. Very interesting topic. Losing a loved one can be very, very difficult for adults, let alone children. Death and the loss of life can be a very sensitive topic that evokes emotions which are often sad, and it can get people in a depressive and low state of mind. So, what motivated you to write a children's book on such a sensitive topic, which you don't normally, see a lot of books, children's books, on the topic of death?
As we all know, this is something that we all would experience. But being in the world today, children are very confronted with death, whether it's something that has been going on for a while. Whether it's 9/11, whether it's when we were at war with the various countries, the violence that's being taken place in school. You just look around. So children are having to cope with death, and parents are having to explain to them what's happening. And also the loss of a pet, the loss of maybe their parents losing their jobs. So even though we oftentimes, when we think of death, we only focus on like the death of a human being, which we should, but also children deal with other kinds of loss of friend, and they grieve in the same way. But how do we begin to have a discussion around this with children? Because one of the things that we do know, that death can impact a person's mental health. And so we don't always have the language when we are working with children. And even adults are not able to process what it means when a person dies. So being able to have a book, or being able to create language, being able to help children to understand and being able to express their feeling. What does it mean when people die? And so oftentimes people like to use euphemism like, oh, they'll be asleep for a long time. So being able to create something that's concrete and help people to understand that when you say this, you might put a child in a situation. Now I'm afraid to go to sleep because I might die. So being able to have appropriate language, being able to help them understand the process of death, being able to allow them to feel what they feel, also to create memories around death, I think is really important. And one of the best ways I think that you can begin to do that is through sitting down and having a children's story to share with that child, so that you can begin to understand how are they feeling, what did they understand about the story. You can stop and do that. And so with all of the things that are actually occurring in the world today, we just recently had an incident that happened in New Orleans. And children are being on social media, being exposed to news. How do we begin to have these conversations around this particular topic? So that's why I thought it was indeed important to be able to do that. And around the holidays, a lot of times we're just coming out of, people are dealing with grief and the loss of a loved one, as well as coming into the new year.
So if you had to use one word to describe your book, what would it be and why?
I would say gentle. And the reason I would say that is because I think the book allows you to approach this topic in a very gentle way. And it also allows you to have a discussion that can be very challenging, but in a very gentle way. And so I would definitely use the word gentle, because we will see that in this particular book, the mother, when she begins to explain this to little Miss Linda, she takes time and she's very gentle with being able to explain that. And when we think about being gentle, we think about being gentle in terms of our teaching, gentle in terms of what language that we use, gentle in terms of, we often say in the counseling field, make sure you create a safe space. So make sure that it's a gentle space in which you can be able to communicate this ideal about death and dying and bereavement to a young child.
Now, the audience knows that the book is about the topic of death, but can you give a brief overview so the audience know a bit more about the storyline in the book?
Thank you so much for that opportunity. This is a book about a mother who goes and just have a regular checkup. She's not ill, she's not experiencing anything, but the doctor diagnosed her with cancer. And so she is in a situation where she's told she has 6 months to live. And she's trying to figure out a way how to share this information with little Miss Linda, and she does. And in the result of sharing it, obviously, little Miss Linda become very distraught. But during her last year, she talks about how to make your dash dance, and that's what the dash between when you are born and when you die. And so there were several different things she wanted to experience. So she began to experience those, to have those memories embedded with little Miss Linda, as she began to make her exit from the world as she knows it. And so she also is explains death to Linda, and it also encouraged little Miss Linda to be able to seek support and counseling in terms of grief, and being able to go around the world and talk to other young children about death. So it's just not ends in so much sadness and things like that. Little Miss Linda is empowered to be able to share this and help other young children cope with death.
So, in the book, what are some of the things little Miss Linda's mother does to create memories for her daughter prior to her death?
She does a photo. She does and that means that all the events that they're doing, she does a scrapbook. And so for the next several months, they take pictures of all the various things that they do. But one of the other things that I think is really significant is she created a Q&A box, and they decorate the box. And these are questions that little Miss Linda can, as she think about what does death mean to her and what she's feeling, she's able to put these questions in the box. And so her mother is able to sit down with her, and as she asks these questions or pull these questions from the box, she's able to answer these questions. And I just want to say, as we talk about these various things that are created, the Q&A box, the scrapbook, and the grateful job. She's doing this because she wants other children, other families to know these are good ideals in which they can also do in reference to if they're dealing with the loss or with the death. And then, as I mentioned, she does a I am grateful job. And this is something she tells little Miss Linda, that after I'm gone, she wants her to think of the things that she'll be grateful for. Because she said, I promise you, you will have bad days, and every day won't be a perfect day. But if you put in here every day something that you are grateful for, then you can go back to the I am grateful job and think of that. And maybe even about the person that is making their transition. What are some things that you were grateful for about that particular individual? And so she's given her some tangible things that she can hold on to. And in terms of making her dash dance in terms of the scrapbook. This is an opportunity where little Miss Linda's mother begins to do some of the things that she wanted to do, whether it was going to the movies, taking a walk in the park, or she participated in a talent show. She even went diving. And so these are things that she began to share because little Miss Linda really wanted to know, how can someone make their dash dance? And so these are the major things that she does, is being able to have the Q&A question, not just a box, but they kind of do it together and they decorate it. And then the scrapbook, which they sit down and they actually decorate the scrapbook and create these memories together. And then also the I am grateful jar, and they just take a jar and they actually decorate it together and then talk about those things that they're grateful for.
Now, you have several questions, in the book to discuss, which discusses with children about death. Can you speak a little bit on this and why you find it was important to include these questions in the book?
Oh, I thought it was very significant because even as one goes through the particular book and one who is dealing with the book, and one of the things I want to say is that in dealing with this particular book is when you're talking to children, you want to make sure you put out a question up front and say, has anyone dealt with recent death? Like, I myself just lost a really good friend. So when you're talking to the young children, you want to make sure, because this can be very triggering for them as they currently going to that, and you want to make sure that they have the support that they need. But the questions are designed so that not only to gain information in which they've gained about the book, but to also explore the dying process, because sometimes death can happen very abruptly. Now, little Miss Linda's mother knew that she had 6 months to live. Could it happen quicker or sooner? But then these are questions to actually get students to think about, or young children to think about, what does death mean to you? How in terms of your religious belief, maybe afterlife, to talk, what is a will, a living will? What does it mean if the family decides, that's a very personal thing, whether I should take the child to the funeral or not? What is a funeral? A headstone. And we also have to think culturally, because funerals can look different and depending on the various cultures or religious belief. So it gets these are questions that allow students to be able to talk about it. And depending on the age of the student, then you will select those various questions to begin to talk about them. Like, what is the cemetery and things of those nature. What type of ways do you want to remember this person? Whether it's planting a tree or doing a memory book. And so I thought it was very significant to actually have these questions. And these are not questions that individual can just stick to. Maybe these questions will inspire you to create your own question, depending on the age group in which you are talking to, or the culture in which you are asking or speaking about dying or death.
Well, I think that the children will find your illustrations to be very helpful when looking at the book on the topic of death, i.e., the mother in the hospital and the mother's funeral. So, focusing on the illustration now, what made you decide to include these type of scenes in your book, and how important was it to select certain pictures for a book on the topic of death?
Oh, it was definitely very important because pictures can be triggering. And so depending on the age of the child, obviously, they can talk to them about that. Like you mentioned, being in the hospital. So being able to talk to children, maybe some children don't even get to see the person while they're in the hospital because maybe the family think, I don't want to see them in that way. So being able to have discussions around children. How did it make you feel that you were not able to see your grandmother in the hospital? Or what was it like when you went to the hospital, when you saw your grandmother in this situation? Maybe she was hooked up to various machines. So it was important to try to think of various elements in which watch the dying process a child might see. So having the funeral scene in the in the casket, what that is like, so it was extremely significant because these are things that do actually take place as a result of one and their death and dealing with grief. And so I was very intentional about the scene, even though her mother has cancer, and oftentimes many people who have cancer, they lose hair. But you would notice in this particular picture, she still has her hair, but she actually has on a wig. So maybe a child would say, I knew someone who has cancer, but they didn't have any hair. And I noticed Miss Linda's mother has hair. And so being able to talk about what are some impact of an individual who has cancer, or depending on the type of death, how does it impact one's body? So being able to have those different stages of one's process of dying was very significant. But also being able to show pictures where they had the opportunity to share some very memorable occasions about what she was doing prior to her death was very significant to me.
Give us your final comments, or if there's anything else that you would like to share that you haven't already spoken about.
Finally, I would just really encourage them to go out and obviously to purchase the books, and they can actually find the books on Amazon, but also to be open to how these books were designed. They were designed to educate, to elevate, and empower individuals to talk about some very, very challenging topics that are not always talked about. And so as we focus and we zero in mostly on the death book, so if you have a child that is actually dealing with grief, or someone, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a pet, loss of a best friend, or wanting to explain, then this would definitely be a book that would allow you to have that conversation, or any of the other topics that are out there. So I would definitely say that that was something that I would definitely want to share. They are relatable, they're easy to read, and they were designed they are considered to be children books, but they are reachable in terms of adults, also adolescents, so you can use them in various ways. So this is definitely something I would definitely want to have the audience to explore and to be open to as they think about the particular books and the various subjects that I've written about.
What I want you to do now is to just please tell the audience again your name, the title of your book series, and where they can buy the books in the series from.
My name is Linda J. M. Holloway, and they can purchase the books from Amazon. And if they would like to reach out to me personally, they can reach me at lindahollowayspeak@gmail.com. If they go to Amazon, they would actually see all of the books that I have listed. And I also want to share that these are multi-award winning books. These books have won several different awards in the book community, and which allows individuals to know that there are people who are outside of just myself, my friends, and my family, who also thought these books were very good books, and books that would allow children to grow in the areas that I'm speaking to, whether it's about their hair, mental health, sickle cell, sexual assault, diversity and colorism, Bad Girls of Montgomery, divorce, and death. That's where you will find my information. Look forward to you all reaching out to me. And also, I do read aloud with children, and so I will definitely be open to those sorts of things also.